So yes, I wanted to thank you again for inviting me to be part of this very interesting webinar. I've enjoyed all the talks so far, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the session. I'm also very excited to have this opportunity to talk about our research showing that there is emotional acculturation also among majority culture members. But let me first start my talk with an example. I would like to first ask you all to imagine the following situation happening between these two teenage girls, Ruya, who is a Turkish-Belgian minority, and her Belgian majority classmate, Anna. They're waiting for a third classmate to buy materials for a school project. Ruya and Anna met on time, but their classmate is nowhere to be seen. And after 20 minutes of waiting, both girls start to feel quite angry at their classmate for being late. Having grown up in a Turkish home culture that highly values respect, Ruya also feels quite disrespected and humiliated by their classmate. In contrast, Anna, who grew up in a Belgian home culture that highly values individual autonomy, does not feel as much humiliated as she feels frustrated by the delay of their classmate. Ruya and Anna are surprised at each other's emotions, and they do not quite agree on what to say or how to react to their classmate when she finally arrives. For Ruya, experiencing different emotions from those of her majority peers is not uncommon. It happens to her very often. But misfitting emotions may come at a social cost, because similarity in emotions is important for relation well-being, is important for a sense of belonging that we have in relationships with others. Similarity in emotions can be validating, as it signals that there is consensus both in what is at stake in a particular situation, but also on what kind of action is required in the situation. As this example shows, and what our research has also revealed, is that immigrant minorities have often emotions that don't fit well with the normative or the typical emotions of majority culture members. But our previous research has found consistent evidence that for minorities, contact with majority is key to reduce this such emotional misfit. So far, we have seen that the emotions of minority individuals who have majority friends, or even those who participate most in majority context, their emotions shift towards normative majority emotions. But of course, it would be more hopeful that in our increasingly multicultural, diverse societies, minority and majority individuals learn from each other and converge in their emotional experiences. Therefore, in this study, we examined whether majority emotions acculturate to. So we wondered whether the reverse process, that majority individuals shifting to minority norm, mirror the process we know already, or how would it be different? So our first question was whether intercultural contact benefits majorities' emotional acculturation too. And we expected that through contact with minority others, majority individuals come to learn the descriptive norms of emotions in the minority group. Another question is whether contact with minority peers is sufficient for majorities to fit well with the minority cultures that they are exposed to. Given that minority groups may be resistant to change, or less motivated to change due to the prevalent assimilationist ideologies that in our societies. And the second point is that minority groups are highly diverse, as they include individuals with different cultural and migration backgrounds. And due to these different backgrounds, there may be inconsistent patterns of emotions, and therefore several competing norms in minority groups. The diversity within these minority groups may therefore contribute to inconsistent or unclear emotion norms. Yet several studies conducted with immigrant minorities and majority members have shown that showing that immigrant minorities' beliefs and behaviors may challenge the standards dictated by the majority group. Early lab studies on minority influence has also shown that minority influence is especially effective when the beliefs and behaviors of the minority are consistent. Even though this body of evidence often concerns the influence of the explicit evaluations and attitudes of majority members, it shows that majority members may come to share the minority's view of reality, especially when there is high consensus among members of the minority group in terms of their beliefs and behaviors. So in our study, we hypothesized that majority's emotional fit with the minority culture would be high to the extent that the minority emotion norms are clear. We further hypothesized that majority's emotional fit would be predicted by contact with minority, but especially so when the emotion norm in the minority group is clear. In context where emotion norms of the minority group are clear, majority members may more easily decode the cultural expectations on what kind of emotional patterns to have in what circumstance. In diverse minority contexts where the emotion norms are clear, interacting with immigrant minority others may thus provide majority members with a gateway to understanding, interpreting, and potentially acquiring the emotional repertoires that exist in the immigrant minority group. We tested our expectations with data from a large sample of majority and minority youth recruited in a nationally representative sample of secondary schools in Belgium. The average age of our participants was 15 years old, and half of the participants were girls. I want to say something a little bit more about the minority group. Our immigrant minority participants came from more than 50 countries of origin, but about 40% of them, more than 40% of them originate from Turkey and Morocco, which are the two largest minority groups in Belgium. Yeah. In a questionnaire, we asked participants to report how many of their friends had a minority background and how frequently they spend time with their peers of a minority background during the school break. We also asked participants to recall emotional situations that fit certain prompts, certain situational prompts that we gave them. And then we asked them to rate the emotional experience they had in that situation in a list of 15 emotions. And here in the slide, you see, I will tell you a little bit more about how we captured this concept of emotional fit with the minority culture. So here, to calculate the emotional fit of Anna, that you see in the slide, we took the individual ratings of majority culture members and made a profile of their individual ratings and correlated the individual profile with the profile of the average intensity ratings of the minority classmate groups for the same type of situation. So the minority culture in our study was located at the level of the class, and we calculated the norms of the minority emotions by calculating these average profiles of intensity ratings. So the correlation scores that came out from correlating the individual profiles of majority participants and with the average emotional profiles of their minority classmates, those correlations produced were conceived, or were we consider them as our emotional fit scores. And finally, we captured the normative clarity in the minority group by calculating also minorities' emotional fit with their own minority group in the class. We then calculated the average of minorities' emotional fit per each class. The average of minorities' emotional fit in a class denotes the extent to which minorities' emotional patterns are consistent and therefore clear. In other words, if minorities themselves had on average a high fit with the norms of their culture in class, we took that as an indication of high norm clarity. Okay, let's see what we have found. A series of multi-level analysis revealed no support for our first hypothesis. Contact with minorities was not associated with majorities' emotional fit to the minority culture at class. But our second hypothesis was met. Our analysis showed that majorities' emotions fit well with the minority emotion norm in class to the extent that the minority norms of emotions were clear. Our third hypothesis was also met. So we see here that the clarity of minority norms of emotions moderated the link between contact with minority and majority's emotional fit with minority culture in class. And here in the slide, you see that majorities had a higher emotional fit with immigrant minority culture norms when they had contact with minority peers, but only to the extent that the norm in the minority group was clear. So to conclude, our study provides the first proof of existence that majorities too may acculturate emotionally under certain conditions, such as contact with minority members and clarity of the emotion norm in the minority group. In addition, our research extends also work on emotional acculturation and emotional convergence by showing that high status people and groups can adjust their emotions to attune to those of low status individuals and groups. In emotional convergence literature, the findings so far have shown that in couples, for instance, there is emotional convergence between two individuals, but the person who changes the most to attune, to adapt their emotions to others are usually low status. So in this study, we see for the first time that high status individuals can also adjust and accommodate their emotions to reach similarity with lower status individuals and groups. Finally, we conclude that the process of emotional acculturation is not entirely a symmetrical process. Our findings deviate a bit from what we have found in the minority in our studies with focusing on immigrant minorities. And it seems that intercultural contact matters for minorities' emotional fit only when in contexts where minority emotional norms are clearest. So there is intercultural contact matters still, but in some situations, in some types of context. Future research should still focus on or try to understand some of the things that we could not capture in our study, which is how do minorities' emotional norms form and what contributes to the clarity of these norms. We don't know. It is an interesting avenue for future research. That it can give a bit more light into the associations we find. And also another question that remains unanswered by our research is whether minorities and majority groups influence each other's emotions in an equal way, and whether this influence is contemporaneous. For instance, we know from minority influence literature that while majorities' influence can be efficient right away, for minority influence, it takes a bit of time to induce change. So our cross-sectional study was not able to capture this longitudinal dynamics of how the two groups shape each other's emotions. And future studies should examine how minorities and majorities adjust to each other, and also whether they jointly shape new emergent norms. So this is something that we could not capture in the study, but it is worthy of investigating in the future. I would like to thank you all for listening to me. And I also want to thank my collaborators, Bache Mesquita, Erin Asletak Tekin, and Felipe Fontana Vieira.